Welcome, everyone, to this wonderful podcast or episode that we have today. We have Bonnie, who has flitted in from Denver or Colorado, and she is here to share with us a little bit about her background, a little bit about who she is, and a little bit about what she plans on moving forward. So, one of the things about Bonnie is she is stepping boldly into her third act. And we will get her to explain a little bit about what the third act means. I've known Bonnie for a good couple of years. We're in the same coaching group. We have spoken a lot of times. I help Bonnie, Bonnie helps me, and we just have wonderful conversations. And one of the things I really love about Bonnie is her love for animals and her horse. Her horse is an amazing creature, and I've seen photos of him, and he is just a beautiful, beautiful horse. I'm not telling you too much about her because I like our guests to introduce themselves. But Bonnie has been a teacher for many, many, many years, middle school, and she is now stepping, as I said, into her third act. Bonnie is an author. She has just released a book, which is amazing and going to be so helpful for so many people. But I'm going to stop waffling now, and I'm going to let Bonnie introduce herself. So welcome to our show, and please tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what it is that you are stepping into.
Well, good morning, Lenka, and good morning, Natalie. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Natalie. I'm super excited to be here on your podcast. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. So as Natalie said, I am in a third act situation in my life right now. What I mean by that is kind of divided life into three segments, kind of birth to 30, where you pretty much run around figuring out what in the world is going on. Maybe 30 to 60, hardworking, you get a career, you get education, you get a career, you're working your tail off, and you get into 60 and maybe to 90 if you're lucky. And retirement comes for some people, and maybe other creative ideas that we didn't see when we're kind of grinding out that work and family of all those years in between. And so now I'm calling it my third act because I have reached that section of my life. And as Natalie mentioned, I spent many years as a middle school teacher and then an instructional coach for middle schools. So I, know how to enjoy a semi-hostile audience with a great sense of humor. And I really enjoyed that. The kids at that level, they're funny and they're interesting and they're on the cusp of things and they're way too cool for school and all the good stuff. So I had a great time with that. I did retire just a couple of weeks ago, and it feels really good to have retired in a way that it was time. I knew it was time with my business growing that I needed to step forward. Not in a way that, oh, I hate what I'm doing. I'm burnt out. I need to get out of here. I loved that work. And it informs everything that I do now, having witnessed that stage of development of people between the ages of 11 and 15, where things really start to get real about who we are and where we're going as adults ahead. So I've had a lot of experience with that and enjoyed it greatly. Now, and actually for the last almost 20 years on the side of all that, I've been working in Colorado, as Natalie mentioned, as a psychotherapist specializing in anxiety management. And knowing that when I retired, I would expand that world and it would be my retirement vehicle, if you will. And now that it's 20 years later than my original idea, it looks a little different, and in some really wonderful ways. One of them is that, yes, I am still a Colorado psychotherapist working in anxiety management. And then I have also joined the online world so that I can reach people further than just in the state of Colorado with transformational coaching to help people with anxiety, to ease that anxiety and become happier and more balanced. And I wrote a book, which is a memoir of my own world, how my own debilitating anxiety disorder developed when I was young, and the path that I've taken through my adult years to release that. And I will say I will always be in recovery from it, and I work through it all the time. But in order to release that really debilitating agoraphobia and panic disorder that kept me unable to do some things in my life that I wanted to do. So I wrote my memoir about how I discovered through working with therapists and coaches and spiritual healers and reading and researching to help myself get out of that space. And within that, I created reflections and action steps and mantras for a reader to take their own path, to take the same or similar path that I did early on to help myself get started to reclaiming my life. And the book is called Cracking the Crazy Maker's Code, 9 Simple Steps to Ease Your Anxiety. It's accessible at about an 8th grade reading level, because I focus on these things as a former teacher. It's an easy read with a powerful story, and if you choose to download the journal and do your own work, a powerful impact potentially for you to find better balance in your life.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, I mean, you and I have often spoken, and you shared some of your stories growing up, and what sort of, I don't know if using the word, helped you get into that phase of being an agoraphobic and, having these massive amounts of anxiety, but also how you've come out of that and really found tools and ways that help you to step into who you are today, and who, has helped you to create who you are today. So just for our listeners, because obviously I know you, but I know Lenka doesn't, and our listeners don't, can you just share a little bit about your experiences that put you in that agoraphobic oh man, I need to put my teeth back in, agoraphobic phase of your life, and what sort of got you into it, and how did you get yourself out of it, just so that our listeners can start to get a feel of where you've come from before we start to really talk about where you're at now.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So let me just say this thing about anxiety as an umbrella statement. Anxiety is nothing but energy. It's just trapped energy. And whatever the sources are that cause us to panic or have social phobias or OCD or agoraphobia, which of course means literally being unable to leave one's home, it's fear of being outside in crowds, fear of leaving the home, fear of being in a place where you can't easily escape, etc. All of that is just suppressed energy that wasn't properly dealt with. And in a situation where people develop panic attacks like I did, they lead to agoraphobia. You might have a panic attack standing in line, say at the bank. You're feeling like you're stuck, you can't move, you don't want anybody to see you, start to panic, etc. And then the bank is a place you don't go anymore. And then maybe it happens in the grocery store, etc. And pretty soon, the world becomes really small and people get stuck and don't leave their homes. So that you understand what that kind of all means. But your question, Natalie, was what did I discover about the roots of my anxiety, which was really eye-opening. I can't even think of a word of how incredible it was that it sort of built up for me being in a very dysfunctional family where nothing really seemed real. There were a lot of secrets and lies and falsehoods going on in my family that caused a lot of confusion and certainly caused me to not really know who I was or what I was doing. And I definitely had no idea how to manage my emotions or really even what they were. So there was addiction in my family. My dad is an alcoholic. There was a lot of infidelity and children born to different fathers than they thought, potentially, I guess would say. You can read it in the book. I've explained all of it, but I'm being a little bit careful, especially when I talk about family members. Some people are siblings, some people are other family members, but I was very careful when I wrote the book to not point a direct finger at anyone to protect their privacy. But when I was in high school, I started to have panic attacks, and I ran out of a couple of classrooms when at one point in one of my classrooms, we were watching, it was a health class, watching a video about a young man who had gotten into a car accident because he was drunk. And that really connected to a very immediate situation that had happened among my family members. So that was my first ever panic attack. And then I started worrying about having panic attacks, and off we go. Fast forward to getting myself into college after my family not really valuing that was a really big deal for me. I got myself into college to work with horses, which had been a huge part of my life since I was a kid. And while I was at college, my panic disorder and agoraphobia really grew to a point that I couldn't go to class or stay in class anymore. So I had to quit and had to go back home where things weren't really psychologically safe for me. So that was probably the lowest point at which I realized I'm either stuck in this house forever in this situation, or what can I do? So I decided to call a therapist at my health plan, and that was a really, really important move in my life. So for your listeners, what to do, reach out would be my first number one answer, whether that's to a trusted family member, a good friend, a professional, to reach out and tell about what's happening. Because if you can't tell about what's happening, it's pretty hard to start a healing path. And for me, I started talking to the animals, my dog, to the horses, because I didn't really trust people at that point in my life. But that helped me to move forward, to even be able to express myself. And then in that therapeutic relationship, which was a really healthy one and very helpful, that helped me start my path to figuring out what my emotions were and how to start to manage them.
And of course, talking to animals, there's none of that judgment. You don't feel that you've got to almost censor yourself because you might be judged. They don't look at you as if to say, well, you should have done better, or you could have done this, or they don't lay on that guilt. They just listen. And it's listening almost with an open heart, because they'll still love you regardless of what you talk to them about, or even how you talk to them. And they still love you. And I think animals really have such power to help us heal and to really help us to connect back with ourselves. So I get why the animals helped you to start your journey to getting where you are now.
They absolutely did. And one thing that happened when I was 10 years old is some sort of divine intervention, I think. An elder sibling's friend, who was 10 years my senior and was working at the local stable on the other side of town, recognized my complete and utter obsession with horses. Since I was like 3 years old and first saw a horse in a parade, my whole world just went like this. And I had horse drawings and horse models and horse this and horse that, but I had never actually been in contact, other than seeing a parade horse, with a horse. And that friend of my family members invited me to go on a trail ride with her, my very first interaction with a horse. And my world completely tilted on its axis. I was changed in ways like it's hard to even describe. But I knew right then that that was my path. And since that very first day, 11 years old, by the time I started actually working, I was working at this stable. I started, taking care of the horses, and then ended up being a trail guide and doing some lessons with kids and all of that. But it absolutely changed my life, and horses have been in my life every day since then, up to, as Natalie mentioned, my horse, Manchi. Now he is quite the supermodel, and he's all over my Facebook page. He has his Manchi's Horse Wisdom Bits on Facebook, and he's been an absolute inspiration and certainly one of my greatest teachers. He pushes my buttons when I need to check myself and when I need to make sure I'm in a comfortable leadership space with him. And he also provides me with grounding and a time where I can just be away from everything except him, the other horses, the wildlife, the barn cats, and the trees, when I can get out and when I'm taking care of him. So that's been a huge grounding force in my life. And as you mentioned, yes, the animals were the first therapists and teachers that I was able to talk to about what was going on with me. And in my book, I mentioned that I would sit in the corner of horse stalls after feeding everybody at the barn was closing for the evening and just watch them and listen to them munching on their hay in their contented, grounded way that they do. And that really helped me to soothe my soul a lot. And I did talk to many a hairy ear in those days, and I still do.
Animals are wonderful, and yeah, we need to really honor them. So I love always hearing your story, and especially about your horse and everything else. So let's fast forward a little bit now. Because we want to know about what it is that you're doing. So what got you then into wanting to help people with, the therapy that you do? Why start the therapy? I mean, what is it that inspired you to do it? And I know sometimes it is the experiences that we have, but not everybody wants to go into that. And especially if it's been very traumatic and there's a lot of pain that you've had to work through. So what's inspired you to become like a therapist and to start to now focus on that and the coaching as well?
Well, in the middle of my teaching career, I became very disillusioned with something that happened in a school district that I worked for at the time. And for a couple of years, I stepped out of public education. And I think that, like you said, that is it about having been in my own therapeutic realm or not? Yes, it definitely, when I look back on how effective beginning therapy was for me and what it led to with other types of therapies and coaching and spiritual connections and meditation, etc. It started a whole path for me. Um, it was just in my soul there somewhere that what I've been going through is unique in a way that if I could continue to bring myself out, especially about the agoraphobia piece, and get well enough with that to be able to help other people, that would really be something. And so, yes, I took those couple of years and got myself trained and set up as a therapist, and then really missed teaching, really missed the kids. So I went back a couple of years later in a completely different district in a different situation and began to enjoy it again. So I thought, well, here I'm doing both of these things. This is a little tough to do all of this at once. So the therapy piece became very part-time, and knowing that I would pick it up more than I was able to do later on, I would pick it up again. But the inspiration for that certainly was that I had received the kind of help that I needed to get going on my own path. So I wanted to create that for other people. And I have worked with talk therapy, which is what I started with, that very first therapist, and it was effective for me. And what I realized is that it wasn't effective enough. And then I was into all those other things because here's something as a therapist that I feel very strongly about. Talk therapy is important, but somatic and energetic therapies and ways of working with that are equally important. One of the things that I am trained in and working with my clients, whether it's coaching or therapy, which are not the same thing, is EFT, emotional freedom techniques, which include the Chinese meridian system, the energy pathways through the body, how to unblock where we get stuck with traumas and crazy making situations in our lives. And I've incorporated that, which also has a piece of EMDR in it. If you've heard of eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, we're working on integrating the hemispheres of the brain with sound, tapping, and eye movements, while also talking about what's happening in the therapy. And bringing those energetic pieces into the talk therapy piece, helps people who are extremely stressed, maybe extremely dysregulated, to approach dealing with their own fears and anxieties without necessarily having to answer, so tell me how you feel. Because we can start moving energy out that's stuck without even having to talk about what's going on. And then eventually be able to step into and lead into that. So talk therapy was really important for me, but adding those other pieces and even some of the very basic finger holds from Jin Shin Jitsu, which is a Japanese energy modality, also using the energy pathways in the body, that I also practice for myself on my own, and I share the bits that I use with my clients. I'm not trained as a practitioner of Jin Shin like I am of EFT, but these things that work for me, I share with others. So that all of that kind of wrapped up in a pool is way more effective than sitting down and just talking, because that can get you dysregulated. And then what do you do with it when the session is over? You've talked about what's going on and then you leave. And that isn't really effective enough to unblock the crazy making roots of anxiety. So adding those energetic pieces in was really important. But that's where it started. I left teaching for a couple of years. I felt drawn to stepping into this world. And now that I'm completely done with the public education world, all the other pieces are developing in my work, between the therapeutic, the coaching, the online community that I'm building for folks who want to come on and connect with others in a safe space. It's all kind of blossomed into that from my original idea.
I love hearing and learning about your journey and how you bring it together. Because for me, one of the first lessons I've ever learned about anxiety and panic attacks is that you can't think yourself out of an anxiety and panic attack, that the body needs to be part of the solution. And I love hearing that, you are really embracing this holistic approach, that it's not just a talk therapy, it's not just the cognitive behavior therapy, the neuro-linguistic programming, anything that just uses our rational cognitive kind of the brain on top of our head, which is so powerful and causes lots of our trouble because things get
Yes.
wired in the not the most convenient way sometimes, because obviously the things that happen to us. But it's not just okay. We cannot just talk about things or journal about things and think about it cognitively. There is the element of the body, the sensations, the emotions, the spirituality that need to come in. And it really brings it nicely to me, and I hope our listeners as well. Really, seeing you with the backdrop of trees, and before we pressed record, you were mentioning that you just love the nature and love being in nature and surrounded by trees. Just hearing your story with the horses just makes so much sense that you so intuitively went into, sure, therapy is helpful and I want to be, specialized and trained in therapy and coaching, slightly different modalities, but they want to add in all of those different things. And to me, all of them have the commonality of that they take you out of the head and they bring you into the body, into the heart, into the feelings and emotions.
Yes, and we need to be there to access the blocked energy that comes from crazy making people, crazy making situations, traumatic events we've been through or witnessed. I mean, there's all those things, all those the potential negatives that can really get coded in us, which is why I called my book Cracking the Crazy Maker's Code. It actually gets coded in our DNA, and it gets jammed there. And if we don't access it in some way, it ends up being relationship issues and eating addictions and drug addictions and rage and driving like crazy people, all of it, right? It becomes that really stuck that we try to ignore and balance and soothe. And it's so much easier to let it go. It's actually possible to let it go. And I'm living proof after having been stuck in my house at one point when I couldn't travel, or, go to concerts, enjoy a movie. I mean, I thought, "Well, I can't live like this. So I'm either not going to live anymore or I'm going to figure something out." And that was that moment when I had to drop out of college after my first semester. I was devastated, absolutely wrecked over that. But that's what kicked me forward to, okay, the choice that I made is I'm going to do something about it. And now I'm in this amazing position where I can help other people to move through that, both through working with me directly or getting started with the book and doing the path, etc. And recently I've been traveling back and forth in the US, and like I said, I couldn't do these things at one point in my adult life. So I take all sorts of pictures of, husband and me on the plane, and I get the flight attendant holding the book and the pilot, all of this great stuff. But it's really fun, and to be able to talk to them and tell them, I'm working on this project to help people be able to get back to do things like flying to see their friends and family that they want to visit when they are unable to do that. And they get so excited about it. They're very helpful to my social media situation because they love to be in the photos and such. But it's been really, really gratifying to be able to make that change, because it's an enormous loss. Being stuck is an enormous loss. It's like a death. Couple of things that, and I'm sure some of your listeners that had dealt with severe anxiety can probably relate to this. One of my best friends asked me years ago to be an attendant at her wedding, and I couldn't. I went to it barely, and had to soothe myself, but I couldn't do that for one of my closest friends. And another best friend was living in New York City for several years, and I couldn't visit her because I couldn't travel to New York, and I definitely could not at that time deal with the hubbub and bustle of the city. And it's amazing and wonderful now to be able to walk through Grand Central Station and with a smile on my face and look around and then hop on the train to where I go next from there sometimes when I visit the East Coast. But it is really taking one's life back. It really is. I took my life back from, and sometimes I refer to it as an addiction. I was so daily addicted to the panic attacks and the anxiety. It's all I thought about when I got up in the morning, how I was going to get it through the day and looking for it and waiting for it to come and get me. It was just, oh, so glad that's not my world anymore. And it doesn't have to be other people's world anymore either.
And what a world we live in, that now therapy, counseling, coaching, support is more available than ever. And you don't need to leave your house for that. Because, before this digital revolution and having everyone amazing, help on top in our laptops and smartphones, we would have to face the fears of leaving the house and going in public places and going to a clinic. I'm not saying that it's not important to see people face to face. Absolutely. There's something magical about being in one room with a person in a safe space to talk. But at the same time, for many people in the initial stages, it must be amazing to be able to find the right fit, the right therapist, the right approach with the right mixture of modalities, and do it from the comfort of their homes. Or even, I think you mentioned it in your book, there is a roadmap to get on their journey themselves, because sometimes even talking to people, even on a Zoom, can be daunting and scary and impossible at point for people. So could you tell us a bit more about then your book and how the book then helps people to take those first steps by themselves.
Absolutely, yeah. And you really pinpointed it, that with the advent of all the technology we have now, we can reach so many more people, right? By phone, on Zoom, whatever, we can connect with more people. At the same time, those things have made people go more inward, right? And become more stuck. And there's in the town I live in, every 6 months, I think, all the way up and down the main street, there are sculptures by local artists. They're amazing. And one of them that catches my attention every time I stop at this intersection is a brass outline of a human. It's just a head, shoulders, it's flat, there's no features. The face is a big hole in the middle, and it's holding a phone like this. And it's like, oh my gosh, that is such a statement on the other side of that. But with that phone, with that computer, yeah, we can reach out and get the help that we need. And even that, as you mentioned, like being on Zoom, being in front of people is still scary. So the path in my book starts with finding animals and trees that you mentioned a few minutes ago, Lenka. Trees that you can talk to. And people look at me and think, why would you talk to a tree? Well, I'll tell you why. I just did it this morning. Before I came on with you folks, I went out on my little front stoop, and I'm incredibly fortunate to have a house that has trees all around, 2 gigantic ones right in the front, and they kind of create a canopy almost over the little front yard in front of the house. And when I'm looking at them, when I'm out for a walk in the morning, which I also did before that, I talk to the trees and I thank them, because I think sometimes we forget how important they are. I thank them for the oxygen that they provide for us. That's pretty important. The shade that they give us, the ability to hold soil so it doesn't erode, the homes that they create for birds and animals and insects, the root system and the trunk that gives us a physical example of stability. Every day you walk out there, you see the same old tree. It's been there for Lord knows how many years, watching all the people come and go and all the bup going on. And there they are, grounded. So I will often talk to a tree. I can do that in my head. Nobody needs to know that I'm doing it. And just say thank you for all of the gifts that you give us. So I sat there on my stoop this morning and looked up at the canopy and just, thank you for the shade on this 96-degree day in Colorado. And thank you for grounding me, that I can just look at them and feel that kind of, oh, okay, everything's fine. It helps me to down-regulate myself when my energy is really stuck there. So the trees and the animals, maybe a pet that you have, and even if it isn't possible for people to go outside, if there's a plant, even inside the house, anything that's natural, any example of nature, a growing plant, a squirrel that you see, day in and day out outside your home, the trees that you encounter, your cat, your dog, your neighbor's cat, and your neighbor's dog, whatever. That's where I started. It's like, I don't trust anybody to talk about what's going on with me right now. You'll find out in the book, I could not trust my parents. And I could not trust the sort of family system that I grew up in. So I never, ever spoke to them about my inner self at all. But it started, with the trees and the animals. And I still go out and have those conversations. And then it became possible for me to consider, okay, I have friends. My best friends know things aren't always quite the same for me as they are for them. But I really started to be able to explain once in a while a little bit more. And what I found out is, and I think that people in general struggle with this, struggle with the imagining that will be rejected if we tell people what's going on. Oh, I can't tell them that. They'll think I'm a freak. Da, 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 da. I find that most people are not like that at all. Most people are going to be supportive and listen and say, hey, is there something I can do to help you? Because so many of us are dealing with the same stuff. We all think we're unique. Oh, nobody's family is like mine. Nobody's anxiety is like mine. Nobody has these weird thoughts like I have. Yeah, and yeah, and yeah. We really, really are so much more similar than we realize. And that's what I'm very excited about, opening my online community to invite people to a space that is safe for that, and know that, yeah, we all have our stuff that we're dealing with. And the more we put it out there, when we air it out, move it out of ourselves and share with each other, the less anxiety we have to carry around and the less bottling we have to go through to keep it down here, hidden.
You were talking about the trees, and one of our episodes is forest bathing, and about the power of the trees and the energy they can give you. And I love how you describe what the trees can give. So it's really nice to speak to someone else, their perspective of the trees, as well as this forest bathing and working with the trees. So thank you for sharing that. It's always nice when guests connect with other guests, even though it's not planned or anything. It's wonderful.
Oh yeah, the Japanese concept of forest bathing, it just the term, like, oh yeah, forest bathing. I can just feel it just thinking about it. And people might think, well, you just walk around in the trees. Well, not just that, but like I had described, my little moment of forest bathing in the front of my house under the canopy of those two is thanking them for the grace that they give us, and recognizing the power that they have to show us what stability is. And so, as Linka asked about in the book, how is the sort of path of that? Throughout the memoir, at the end of each chapter, I put reflection questions for folks to consider, sort of their own background and what's going on with them. And then I add a mantra that I used when I'm out walking, or I'm spending time in nature, that I repeat to myself, instead of those awful thoughts that always come to our heads when we're overwhelmed. Say, oh, okay, I'm beating myself up about this thing that I didn't take care of, or I didn't do well. I'm going to go back to that mantra and start repeating it, because that's one of the really important trainings for our brain, is to train our brains to be able to take a fork in the road. Let me just use my hand as if forking this way or forking that way, to fork back to a positive thought and to articulate it out loud, so that not only is it in your mind, but it can be heard as well. And then also with the reflection questions and the journal, is it a free printable journal, PDF printable journal you can pull out from the book and do your own work, because then there's action steps about how to get started, like I did on this path. And then you can print that out and work with it. So if you like, I can read just a little section from the introduction, and then give you an example of those reflection questions and action steps. Do you think your audience would like that?
I'm sure they will. Yes, go for it.
Okay, so from the introduction, this is the sort of the path that I've created for myself and put here for people to follow. As deep and dark as the path through crazy making, anxiety, panic, and self-doubt can be, there's always light awaiting us. What I'll share with you here are moments and experiences that may be similar to some of your origin story and current struggles. I've included reflections, mantras, and action steps to help you recognize the roots of anxiety and calm your stress. It's a daily practice, not a miracle cure. If you will walk your path along with me, I can show you how I've responded to these challenges and found relief and joy in my mind and heart. Maybe along this path, you'll find something that'll work for you too. I offer my journey here to assure you that you're not alone if you have been burdened with debilitating anxiety, and to demonstrate that you too can thrive and not just survive. It's about creating a path out of panic attacks and agoraphobia, obsessive compulsive behaviors, and social anxiety. It's about releasing yourself from the crazy maker's coding and allowing yourself to experience the joy of living life in a responsive rather than reactive way. And most importantly, it's about your recovery from anxiety. It's about your growth, your agenda, and your personal path to become the healthiest, happiest you that you can become. You deserve to be free of what's blocking your energy and causing you distress. So please join me on a journey of recovery, one in which you may find your authentic self, free of pain and overwhelming anxiety, and experiencing a life of appreciation for your abundance. Let's crack the crazy maker's code together, because the message in this story is about how you can begin your journey to comfort, safety, and peace of mind. So that's a little section of my intro. And then at the end of chapter 1, which is called Origins, here are the reflection questions. In your early life, what did you think of as normal behavior or relationships that weren't? Whose actions have you made excuses for or chosen to ignore? What comparisons have you made between your family and other people's families? Have you sought comfort and support in others outside of your immediate family? Why or why not? The mantra for that chapter is, even if my family didn't always support me, I accept myself and I'm worthy of love. And the action steps include, take time to sift through your memories and be as honest as possible with yourself. What did you accept in the past that's now unacceptable? In your Cracking the Crazy Maker's Code journal, make a list of family beliefs, activities, or behaviors that once seemed acceptable, but now do not. Write a few lines about each example and describe your reactions to them, focusing on how you felt then and how you feel now. And then there's a QR code right there at the bottom. It's at the beginning of the book too. Little QR code there that the folks can use to access the printable journal to do their own reflections and action steps.
It's a really good book, because you, like you said, you share your story, your experiences, you give them tools then that they can utilize to help them to help your readers to move forward. And it's a nice way. So it's not a book and it's not a workbook. It's almost sort of a lot of stuff combined, and it's really a lovely thing. And I'm sure our listeners, those who need it, would benefit from it. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for giving us an example of what is in the book. And as you said, it's readable. It's not a scientific text or a therapeutic text or something. It's for the Joe blogs or the Jill blogs, just your average person who is just trying to create more life in one's life. And I think your book will help, because when you're living with that anxiety and that stress and that pressures, how can you have more life in one's life to help you to have more? When you're stuck, when you're in that place of fear, or that place of judgment, or even locked in your own house and locked in your mind, you cannot create that more life in one's life until you actually learn to step out. And you've shared some tools to help with that journey, because everybody's journey is different, but lessons that individuals learn doesn't mean it's not going to be something that somebody else can really experience from. So thank you for sharing that. Really, it's wonderful to hear you talking about your book. I mean, obviously we've spoken, but you've talked about your book as in writing the process of your book and the stresses of that. I'd love you to just share a little bit about your experience of writing, because we've had a couple of guests coming on talking about their writing stories, and them, Cheryl and Hasina. They've spoken about their experiences of writing, and I'd love to know what your experience has been, because obviously everybody's different. You were a different person to Cheryl, and you're a different person to Hasina. What's been your experience of writing that book, and what inspired you to write the book?
Well, you were there for some of the good, the bad, and the ugly, Natalie, in this process of writing this book. Woo! And I'm so glad that I did it, and I'm so glad that I had your support in ways that were really important, and I appreciate that. Yes, the Jill blogs and the Joe blogs that crack me up. There are a lot of us who prefer to read article length texts online mostly, and there are still a lot of us who like to read books, and I'm definitely in that nerdy zone of a 400-page book on some nonfiction topic is woo for me. It's not for everyone. So I very intentionally wrote Cracking the Crazy Maker's Code to be accessible, not a 400-pager, friendly. Who doesn't love a raccoon with a magnifying glass? Come on, people, really. And I have some white space and some photos and, so that it's not scary to look into, right? Without, as you said, any of the psychological jargon. This is not a book for therapists. No, this is a book for all of us. This is a book that is concise in its story, that can be expanded on to any level and length that you want to take it, but doing your own work with the path through doing that through the journal if you choose to. So that was very intentional for me to make it, pick it up in an airport, take a flight across the country and be done with it, the reading, if that's the kind of sit down read you want. Some people I've spoken to have sat down for a couple of hours and read the whole thing. Another friend of mine right now is as she said, eating one chapter at a time, and which is a very short experience because the chapters are not long or involved. So she's enjoying that and then going through the journal. But the process, whew, mama, I knew that if I was going to reach more people than an individual therapy session work that I do in Colorado, I was going to have to write something about it. And I just started laying out the foundation, like what would I call the chapters of my journey through this? And I just started by coming up with keywords for the title chapters, and then sat with it a bit, and went through what are the things that are coming forward. And it was, I remember listening to Meryl Hayton about how she loves having her work being a creative. Like she decides if she's going to take a bike ride one afternoon, or she's going to work on her business, and taking that creative time, opening that space to allow ideas to come is so critical. Because if you're grinding away on something else, the ideas are not going to come. So I took some time to sit back and look at that. And when I just looked at the list, I came up with chapter titles: origins, because I started talking with about family first, conversations, relationships, medication, darkness, guts, cleaning house, perseverance, and opportunities. Those are the 9 titles of the short chapters in the book. And then I saw that as a flow, like, okay, here's where I started. Here's where, whoa, this is where it went really bad. And then here's where I started to move out, and this is where I am now. I can do that. So I started writing that with the background of Charlotte's Web. Okay, a lot of people have heard of this amazing children's novel, Charlotte's Web by E.B. White, which was my favorite book as a kid. Favorite. I can't even count how many times I read it as a child and an adult, because I wanted so much to be Fern, the main human character, and in the barn, was surrounded by all the animals. And I think that's my thing. It's my nirvana. I didn't realize then that Charlotte was my first, my first animal guide, my first imaginary friend, if you will. And I counted on her and her care of Wilbur the pig, her support of his anxiety really helped me when I was doing imagining wildlife to help me. I didn't know that, in 2005, I was actually going to develop a therapeutic modality called wildlife imagery therapies. That's a story for another day. But I check in with my wildlife guides all the time to help me move forward. But I started writing about that and I said, oh, this is great. I'm going to have a little quote, an epigraph at the beginning of each chapter from something from that book, which I just love so much. And I wrote sort of chapters and didn't get too deep into I turned it into an editor and she said, attributions, not permission. You have to ask permission to use these quotes from Charlotte's Web. Here's someone you can call who does this work, who will called them, a couple $100, we'll look into it with the publisher. And I thought, no. So of course you get online, you can find anyone. I found the person who's in charge of E.B. White's literary estate is his granddaughter. I found her email. I asked her if I could do it. She said no. I was crushed. I wanted to take the book and throw it in the toilet and be done with it because it was so important to me to have Charlotte's through the whole thing. Then I pulled myself out of that hole and started writing again. And the editor also said to me, this is a great start. Go back and write the book. I thought, oh, okay. I have a lot more to dig into and write about, and I don't want it to be too long. So we found that balance, and I turned it into her again. And she said, oh, that's so much better. Okay, we'll work with this, blah, blah. Oh, and you might need a literary attorney. What? Well, you've written about your family members in here and not in the most attractive light in some cases, and you don't want to get sued, do you? Oh, okay. So then I went back and ripped it all apart again, changed the people into more than one person in some cases, changed their genders, didn't identify their genders, everything that I needed to do to keep myself in a safe place where nobody could identify who I was talking about. So it was a process. And yes, I wanted to chuck it in the toilet more than once. I'm so glad I didn't. And getting through that and then working with a self-publishing publisher here in Denver, who definitely held my hand through a lot of these things and took me through how you put it on Amazon and go for the Amazon bestseller, which I achieved in 2 categories. Woohoo. How you do a book launch. I mean, I had no clue about any of this. So something for your listeners is I had no clue about how to write a book. I had no clue how much work it was going to be to write a book. I had no clue how much work it was going to be to market after writing the book, and how much I was going to learn from all these wonderful people who've helped me along the way, including you, Natalie, to be able to put this thing out in the world. And now it's available. People can access it easily. And I know that it can help them like it helped me take that path to start moving out of being stuck in anxiety. So they can go onto Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, easy to find. And I'm really excited about being able to help a lot of people, a lot more than I can as a single session therapist.
And I love how you've described the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yes, there were times when the blue smoke was flying, but I'm so glad you persevered. And the thing is, like anything, this has been a learning curve because you didn't know how to write a book. You didn't know what entails writing a book. But the perseverance that now when you write your next book, you've got more ideas and you've learned something. So like anything, there's that learning curve to it, but it's also having the right people in your corner. Like you said, you've got Veronica, who's your self-publisher. You've got, friends and support to keep you going so that when you did throw the book in the toilet, you managed to get it out again and carry on with it. So even with the soppy pages and everything else. So I'm so glad that you've persevered with this. And it just shows that it doesn't necessarily have to be easy, even something that's really difficult and, just, as you said, soul destroying sometimes and just takes all your energy. It's worth it to just persevere with it and to keep going. So I love how you shared the experiences that you had and the way that your book was going, and then through technicalities and legalese and whatever else's, you've had to almost shift the way that you've wanted to write that book, and taking that disappointment and having that sort of vision and having to change it and create something different yet still the same. And that's a wonderful story to share, because I think sometimes it is easy to just give up, but you knew that this book needed to come out, and I think you were also getting a few kicks up the butts as well, which doesn't help.
I definitely endured some kicks up the butt. And they actually did help me. And Natalie, you and I belong to what I call Gary's Magic Circle with Gary Barnes International, that business group of people where I was able to find you, the work that you do with introverts in business. And for me, okay, I can write a newsletter, and I can find a picture, but I don't know how to put it out in the world. And boom, here comes Natalie, puts it out in the world for me every couple of weeks. Thank you for that. And then I met the publisher and the editor and artwork. All the things were in this Gary Barnes International group that we belong to that helped me to be able to step through and do this. And I am working already on a second book with a school administrator friend of mine for middle school parents on how to deal with what's happened to your child now that they've become a middle schooler, which will be a humorous read with some really good tips for parents to kind of cope with that space. But yeah, it's really inspired me to write about things that I know are important in places where people need insight. And, I have lots of insight about how to be deeply debilitated by anxiety and move out of that. And definitely a lot of insight about dealing with thousands of preteens and early teens through all of those years. So it's really fun to do it. And anybody could do it that wants to. I was not a writer. I didn't come from a writing family or any of that. I can't say I wasn't a writer. That's not true. I have written things for horse publications and that sort of thing, but I didn't imagine myself until not too long ago actually publishing a book that could really help people. And I'm so glad that all the people were there to help me get to this place so I can help people get to their place, wherever that is.
And as the saying goes, there's a book in everyone. You just got to sit down and write it.
There is.
Well, we can talk for ages, as you know, we can talk for ages, and it's always lovely to hear, our guests' different perspectives and different ways of looking at things. But time is moving on, and we really appreciate you sharing your time with us, sharing your energy. But we've come up to that time in the episode where we like to get more from our guests. We just like to have more, and this is where we ask our guests: is there a tip or 2 or 3 tips? Is there a gold nugget or a thought that you feel that you want to share? Is there something that you want to share that we haven't asked and it's sitting there and you're thinking, you know what, I need to get this out? Is this a message that you want to repeat? It doesn't matter what it is. This is your space to just share what you feel you need to share right now.
Oof, okay, thanks. 3 things pop into my head. I can manage them all at once. One thing about the mind that can get anxious is there's a lot going on up there. Yeah, so thank you for that. Thinking about the ways that you've helped me makes me hearken back for a moment to my newsletter. I write a newsletter twice a month on various topics called musings from the menagerie that you put out in the world for me after I wrangle around with it and clean it up and send it off. And today actually is when one comes out this morning. And I happened to write about the writing process. It's called My Book Wrote Itself. Just sort of about that, here's this lived experience that I had that just needed to come out. And I encourage reader in that newsletter to write their own story. Maybe you don't want to write a book and publish it. Maybe you don't want to write, you'd rather record, but to put it out there somewhere, maybe just for yourself and hide it in a drawer. Maybe you could write or record your story and leave it for people, your children or people to come after you, maybe for select friends that you want to share some things with. But it's really good for us, I think, to write our stories and look back and reflect and see how we actually look at ourselves and how we were created to be the people that we are and what we can do to make ourselves better and happier. So I know that Lenka will put my website and such up for folks later. And on my website, you could go to the contact page and just ask to be added to the newsletter list if you like. No spam. Oh, and when you unsubscribe, you can actually unsubscribe, unlike all those businesses where you buy products and you try to unsubscribe and they keep coming. No, not like that. I hate that. But yeah, so the newsletters become fun to write and important. And sometimes it's just this interesting thing happened. I'm reflecting on it. And sometimes it's some really deep, let's dig into this and look at it things. And then a sort of a nugget about where to start. Where to start for people who are struggling with this. Really, the trees and the animals. Practice talking about what's going on for you. Even if you're confused and it's hard to label things, just how you're feeling to somebody as safe as a tree, somebody as safe as an animal, to start practicing letting that energy out instead of hiding and holding it so much like I did as a younger person. For me, that was the start of everything. And animals made it safe to me then to approach, once I had practiced being able to talk about some of these things, to approach these subjects with the few people in my life that I really trusted, my closest friends, and went from there. And then that gave me the impetus and the confidence to reach out to a professional. And in my book, I mentioned specifically, if you go that route, you contact a therapist or a coach, it can be really difficult to step back and see them as an entity that you've hired, like you would hire a painter for your house. They may do a great job painting, they may not do a great job, and you might want to say, hey, this isn't working out. It's really hard to do that when you're shopping for therapy or shopping for coaching. But it's really important to look carefully at how you're feeling in that connection, how you feel in that relationship with that person, and know that if it doesn't feel 100% comfortable and safe, that you can just walk away and try again. I was super fortunate. The first therapist that I reached out to was fantastic. And as a matter of fact, I just saw him face to face 2 weeks ago after 40 years. We had communicated back and forth a little bit, and then I asked him to be a pre-reader for my book. So you'll find a quote that he wrote in there, which was great, but to actually connect with him again after 40 years was really cool. But sometimes those relationships aren't quite perfect, and you're in charge. You're in control of your own process. So know that it is totally okay to bail and try again if it doesn't feel 100% right the first time that you do that. So that, I would say, is the most important thing, to start to talk to the beings that you can allow to hear your story and know that you'll be unconditionally accepted by them, by hearing that. And then looking at habits that we have. One of the greatest things that I do for myself every day is movement. Sounds simple. Yeah, it is, but it's profound in how I feel. In the morning when I get up, I stagger around the room, find some clothes, put on some shoes, and push myself out the door, especially on the days when I think, oh, I don't want to do that, or my head is full of blah, 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 blah. The first thing I do is start moving. And if the weather is really bad and I'm not going out there, I will do some Pilates movement or a little bit of yoga, or turn on the music. Oh my gosh, I love to turn music up really loudly when I'm here in the house, and dance around the house and just run up and down the stairs, anything, just get my body moving, because that's part of that energy flow that unblocks the stuck crazy maker's code in the body, that unblocks those trapped energies that can help us move. So movement is the best thing to start with. And then hydration, not necessarily coffee first, start with water, and water potentially with electrolytes, so that, or even coconut water is one of my favorites, because I'm not a fan of the artificial colors and such in the sports drinks that we have available. But hydrating yourself, your brain needs hydration. to relax and function well, and the body to move that energy. So that's absolutely number one. In some way, I start with movement every day, and it really gets things going in a positive direction.
And these have been some fantastic nuggets. So thank you so much for sharing with us. So as you've mentioned, where people can get your books and your website, can you just share your website with our audience and where else they can find you quickly?
Sure. It couldn't be any easier. BonnieBrindle.com. It's just my name, BonnieBrindle.com. There you can find the page about my book, and you can find click buttons for Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Goodreads, or you can pick it up there if you choose. You can also find the page for my the community called the Anxiety Avenger Alliance, the community that I'm building now. So you can click into that and get a free month on that if you wish. Or you could go to my contact page and tell me anything you want to tell me, ask me a question that you want to ask to be on the newsletter, anything like that. Super easy to find all of it at bonniebrindle.com. And then I'm also on Facebook under my name, and also on LinkedIn at this time. So you can find me in both of those places too. But I really appreciate that you both invited me onto this wonderful podcast about taking the life that you have and turning it into also the life that you want. I think that's just fantastic, a fantastic premise to offer to an audience, because we're all seeking to be better and be well and make things not only for ourselves better, but that flows to everyone and everything around us as well. So if we're all working on that together, how can it not be absolutely fabulous and useful for ourselves and the world around us? It's great. Thanks.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Bonnie, and thank you for sharing your links. As we've mentioned, your links and everything, information will be in the description. And again, thank you so much for sharing your time, sharing your knowledge, sharing your energy with us today, and the experiences that you have. We've only just touched onto it, and I'm sure that we will be speaking with you again, because we do love to have our guests come back. So I'm sure we will be speaking and seeing how far you've gone on your journey. So thank you again. And for our listeners, what have you got from today? What have you learned from your experiences? Have there been tools in here that you would find, oh, I need to start talking to some animals, or I need to really start embracing those trees and seeing them? What have you got from listening to Bonnie today? But also, how do you deal with your anxiety if you struggle with it? What tools do you use? We'd love to hear about your experiences and what you've learned along the way, because as we all know, not one size fits all. So one person's story might not reflect or even resonate with somebody else, but we never know what message is being shared, and we never know who needs that message right now. So we would love to know, what is your story? What is your experiences? And what you've got from this podcast or from this episode, and what has resonated from listening to Bonnie. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
If you enjoyed listening to our conversation, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe. We would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and write a short review.